If you've been scrolling through royal headlines lately, you've probably seen 10 different versions of the same story, half of them exaggerated, some of them just made up. So today, I'm cutting through all of that noise and giving you what's actually happening inside the British royal family right now, based on real reporting, not rumors. This is one of the most dramatic stretches the monarchy has had in years, and almost none of it needed to be invented. If you appreciate this type of content, gently tap that like button. Let's get into it. Let's start with the story everyone actually wants to know about: King Charles and his health. Back in February 2024, Buckingham Palace announced that Charles had been diagnosed with an undisclosed form of cancer. It was actually found by accident, during a separate procedure for a benign enlarged prostate condition. The palace never revealed exactly what type of cancer it is, and honestly, they've been very careful about that from day one. For a long time, the king kept working through treatment. Some public appearances were scaled back, some ceremonial duties were adjusted, and there was a lot of speculation about how serious things really were. But here's the update that matters. In December 2025, Charles shared some genuinely good news. He said that thanks to early diagnosis and what he called effective intervention, his treatment schedule could actually be reduced heading into 2026. That's not the same as being cancer-free, and the palace has never used the word remission. But it is a real, meaningful step in the right direction. And the momentum has continued. As of this month, royal insiders are describing Charles as being in really good form, with his public engagements now pretty much back to where they were before his diagnosis. He's still receiving treatment, believed to be a form of immunotherapy, and doctors are reportedly very pleased with how he's responding. A royal expert reporting for Woman and Home noted that after this progress, the king has been looking forward to a proper family-focused summer up at Balmoral. So to be clear on what we actually know, Charles is not cured, he's not in remission, and his cancer type has never been publicly named. But he is maintaining a full schedule. Doctors are encouraged by his progress, and his treatment burden has been easing rather than increasing. That's a very different picture from a lot of the panic headlines you might have seen floating around. Now, here's a story that's been building for a while and finally came to a head this year. Prince Andrew. If you followed the royal family even a little, you know Andrew's name has been tied to scandal for a long time because of his association with Jeffrey Epstein. For years, he kept some royal patronages and public standing even after stepping back from official duties. That finally changed. Buckingham Palace confirmed that King Charles initiated a formal process to strip Andrew of his remaining style, titles, and honors. He is no longer referred to as Prince Andrew or the Duke of York in any official capacity. He now goes by Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. One insider described it as a moment where inaction was no longer an option for the family, and that the king made clear he was willing to put the monarchy's long-term credibility ahead of family loyalty. Along with losing his titles, Andrew also had to give up his long-standing residence at Royal Lodge. Reports indicate he's since relocated to a smaller, far less grand property, a farm in the Sandringham area of Norfolk. That's a massive downgrade from the large estate he occupied for years, and it's been described as both a practical and symbolic move, practically because Royal Lodge required serious upkeep money and security, and symbolically because it puts real distance between Andrew and the rest of the working royal family. His absence from major royal events, like Garter Day, has become the new normal rather than the exception. His daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, have reportedly worked to distance themselves from the fallout too, continuing their own public engagements separately, including Eugenie representing herself at international events like Art Basel in Doha. The family has clearly drawn a hard line here, and it looks like a permanent one. Now let's get into the story that genuinely surprised royal watchers this year. A private reunion between King Charles and Prince Harry, along with Meghan Markle and their children, Archie and Lilibet. For years, the relationship between Harry and the royal family, and specifically between Harry and his father, has been strained, to put it mildly. Public appearances together have been rare, and meetings have often been brief, tense, or entirely absent. So it was a genuine surprise when it was reported that Charles met privately with Harry, Meghan, and their children at Highgrove. For Charles, this was reportedly his first time seeing his grandchildren in around 4 years. 4 years is a long time to go without seeing your own grandkids, especially when you're dealing with a serious health diagnosis at the same time. Royal commentators have described the meeting as meaningful, though nobody involved has offered a detailed public account of what was actually discussed. What we do know is that it happened, it was private, and it took place at Highgrove rather than at a formal royal residence, which suggests it was meant to be personal rather than a photo opportunity. This doesn't necessarily mean everything is fixed between Harry and the rest of the family. There's still plenty of distance and unresolved tension in that relationship, and one reunion doesn't erase years of public rift. But for a king managing his own health situation, getting the chance to reconnect with grandchildren he hadn't seen in years is a genuinely significant personal moment, regardless of what it does or doesn't mean for future royal relations. Now, let's talk about something that ties directly back to Harry. And it's not a great picture right now: the Invictus Games. If you're not familiar, Invictus is the international sporting event Harry founded for wounded, injured, and sick servicemen and women. And it's genuinely done a lot of good for veterans over the years. But the version of it, heading toward Birmingham in 2027, is reportedly in serious financial trouble. Reports describe a funding gap in the tens of millions of pounds, with only a small handful of confirmed corporate sponsors this time around, and one previous headline sponsor, Boeing, choosing not to continue its support for this edition of the Games. On top of that, Australia's federal government decided not to renew a multi-million-dollar funding commitment to Invictus Australia, which reportedly caught that organization completely off guard. One executive there said they found out only minutes before the funding cut was publicly announced. There's also been renewed scrutiny of how the foundation spends its money, including claims from a recently published book that some of the funds have gone toward private jets and 5-star travel for Harry and Meghan rather than directly toward athletes. To be clear, nobody has produced evidence that money was stolen or misused illegally. And the Invictus Games Foundation has not responded publicly to a lot of these specific claims. But the optics have been rough, and even some former organizers have reportedly grumbled, off the record, that the event sometimes felt more like the Harry and Meghan show than a competition centered on the veterans themselves. Meanwhile, on a lighter but still eyebrow-raising note, Meghan has faced criticism for selling outfits she previously wore at past Invictus Games through her own shopping platform, with none of those proceeds going back to the charity itself. Combine all of that with Birmingham's own well-documented financial struggles as a host city, and you've got a genuinely uncertain road ahead for the 2027 Games. Which brings us to a pretty interesting subplot. Harry reportedly wants his father to personally attend and even help open the Birmingham Games next year. According to reporting, this isn't just about optics for Invictus. It's described as something Harry genuinely wants for his relationship with his father, too. One royal commentator, though, has been more skeptical, suggesting the timing conveniently lines up with a moment when Harry and Meghan's other business ventures haven't been performing as well as hoped, which makes an olive branch built around a high-profile royal event a pretty useful move either way. Whether Charles actually shows up will likely depend a lot on his health and his schedule at the time, but it's clearly being floated as a real possibility behind the scenes. Before we get there, It's worth mentioning that Charles's health situation has affected more than just his own schedule. It's shaped how the whole institution operates. At Trooping the Color, the annual military parade celebrating the monarch, Charles chose not to appear on horseback this year, opting instead for a carriage procession, something he's now done for 2 years running. It's a small detail, but it's the kind of thing royal watchers pay close attention to as a signal of how much stamina he's working with day to day. He's also continued to take on genuinely demanding diplomatic work despite everything, including hosting Nigeria's president, Bola Tinubu, and the First Lady at a state visit that royal commentators noted was the first of its kind between the two countries since 1989. That's not the schedule of someone who's stepped back from his role. It's someone actively pushing to keep the monarchy visible and engaged on the world stage while managing his own recovery in the background. There's also been some smaller, more human-scale news around the king that's worth a mention, like reports that nearly all of the gardening staff at one of his residences quit over pay disputes, which briefly became its own minor headline about how the royal household treats its own staff. It's not a constitutional crisis by any means, but it's a reminder that even the smaller stories around the monarchy tend to get amplified because of who's involved. Let's shift to some happier, more straightforward royal news. Princess Eugenie and her husband, Jack Brooksbank, welcomed their daughter into the world on August 3rd this year. The announcement came directly from the couple, and it's a nice reminder that behind all the scandal headlines, this is still a big extended family with regular family milestones happening alongside everything else. And speaking of quieter developments, Prince William and Kate Middleton have continued settling into their new home, which reporting has referred to as their forever home, Forest Lodge, while still retaining their previous base as well. On the health front, Kate's own cancer journey has also had positive news. After revealing her diagnosis back in March 2024, just about a month after Charles's own announcement, she went through around 6 months of preventive chemotherapy and was reported to be in remission as of earlier this year. Think about what that actually means for this family behind the scenes. The king and the future queen consort in waiting were both fighting cancer diagnoses at the same time, while also trying to keep a national institution running and largely shielding their families from the kind of public scrutiny that would break most people. Kate has since eased back into a fuller schedule of public engagements, though she and William have generally been more protective of their children's privacy and routines than previous generations of royals were. That's 2 senior royals who've dealt with cancer diagnoses within a month of each other. And both have had encouraging progress since, which says a lot about how heavy of a stretch this has actually been for the family behind closed doors. So if you zoom out and look at everything happening at once, you've got a king managing a serious illness while still trying to run a modern monarchy, a major and permanent family rupture over the Andrew scandal, a tentative but meaningful reconciliation with Harry's side of the family, and a new generation of royal babies and homes being built in the background. It's not the version of the story you'll get from an exaggerated thumbnail, but it's arguably a more interesting one, because it's actually true. Quick break. If you want more royal coverage like this, one that actually checks the facts instead of just chasing headlines, make sure you're subscribed and check the description and pinned comment below for more on this. Now, back to wrapping things up. Let's also touch on where William fits into all of this, because his role has quietly expanded this year. With his father managing a health condition and taking a somewhat lighter public load than before his diagnosis, William has been picking up more of the institutional weight, more solo engagements, more representation at events Charles might have attended in years past, and a generally higher profile as the heir apparent preparing for a role that, realistically, could come sooner than anyone in the family wants to think about out loud. None of that is being said publicly in those terms. Of course, the palace is never going to frame it that way, but if you look at the pattern of who's showing up where, it's a pretty clear trend. Kate has been visibly present alongside him at more of these engagements too, since her own recovery has allowed her to take on a fuller schedule again. It's also worth noting that all of this is happening against the backdrop of a genuinely reshaped family structure. A few years ago, the working royal family was built around a certain set of assumptions. Andrew as an active, if controversial, senior royal, Harry and Meghan half in and half out of the fold, and Charles as a newly crowned king still finding his footing after his mother's 70-year reign. Almost none of that holds true anymore. Andrew is functionally gone from royal life. Harry and Meghan are still outside the working family, but apparently on speaking terms with Charles again, at least in private. And Charles himself has now been king for several years, has weathered a serious health scare in full public view, and has arguably come out the other side of it with more public sympathy than he had going in. That's really the through line across every single one of these stories. A family that's had to publicly manage illness, scandal, estrangement, and reconciliation all at the same time, in front of cameras, while still running a functioning national institution. Whatever you think of the monarchy as a concept, it's hard to argue this hasn't been one of its most eventful stretches in recent memory. What's clear is that 2026 has been one of the most consequential years for the British monarchy in a long time, not because of any single scandal, but because of how many major threads are running at once. Health, family fractures, quiet reconciliation, and generational change, all happening in the same 12 months. Whatever comes next, whether that's further health updates on Charles, more fallout from the Andrew situation, or developments in the relationship with Harry and Meghan, it's worth following the actual reporting rather than the recycled clickbait that tends to dominate this topic. Now, a lot of people watching this are probably wondering what actually happens if Charles's health situation changes down the road, whether that means stepping back further from duties or, eventually, abdication. It's a fair question, and I want to answer it honestly instead of feeding you a fake headline about it. As of right now, there has been no announcement, formal or informal, from Buckingham Palace about Charles stepping down, and nothing from William or Anne about any coronation planning. Those kinds of claims you sometimes see in thumbnails are simply not true. And if something like that ever did happen, it would come through an official palace statement, not a leak or a guess. What we do know is how the system would work if it ever came up. Unlike some European monarchies, Britain doesn't really have a tradition of living abdication. The last time it happened, with Edward VIII in 1936, it was treated as a genuine constitutional crisis, not a routine transition. Modern British monarchs, including Charles's own mother, Queen Elizabeth II, have historically served until death, rather than stepping aside voluntarily. And there's no indication Charles is planning to break with that tradition. If his health did decline to the point where he couldn't carry out his duties, the far more likely mechanism isn't abdication at all. It's something called a regency, where William, as the next in line, could be appointed to carry out the king's official functions while Charles remains monarch in name. That's a completely different process from a coronation, and it wouldn't involve Anne announcing dates for anything, since Anne isn't in the line of succession position to do that kind of announcing in the first place. So if you ever see a headline claiming a shock coronation announcement or an official step-down, treat it the same way you'd treat any other unverified claim online. Check it against the palace's own statements before you believe it. Right now, based on everything actually confirmed, Charles remains king, actively carrying out his duties, receiving treatment, and by all accounts handling one of the more demanding chapters of his reign with more resilience than a lot of people expected. And if you want to go deeper on how the royal succession and monarchy actually works behind the scenes, I made a video on exactly that. You can check it out by clicking right here.